This isn't a self-help show. It's a soul remembering. I'm Cynthia Sharp, educator, trauma-informed practitioner, proud mom to a son with Down syndrome, and vice president of Additional Needs Incorporated. I created Down to Heal because too many of us are told to survive and never taught how to heal. This is where we change that. Every other week, I sit down with parents, practitioners, neurodivergent voices, and body-based wisdom keepers. We talk about what really heals: nervous system regulation, somatic truth, community care, and the stuff you don't hear in the mainstream. Because healing isn't talked down, it's shared, it's messy, it's sacred. If you've lived it, studied it, questioned it, or been broken by it, this is the space for you. Down to Heal is a space I wish I had, honest, whole, and held. We're not here to fix. We're here to feel, reflect, and rise together. Listen on Spotify or YouTube. Let's get down to heal. Some conversations aren't just about information, they're about illumination. Today's is one of them. When a parent hears a diagnosis like autism or Down syndrome, the world can feel unfamiliar. Yet within that moment lies an invitation to see our children through love, patience, and possibility. That's where today's guest comes in. Carolyn O'Connell, a behavioral analyst, walks with families through those tender, transformative moments, helping them understand not just behavior, rather communication, connection, and healing itself. We explore what it means to support a child's growth from the inside out, from early signs and family dynamics to the deeper work of staying attuned, grounded, and hopeful. This isn't just about therapy, it's about presence. It's about remembering that love is the strategy. Welcome to Down to Heal, where science meets soul and every story reminds us that healing begins when we choose to stay connected. Hi, Carolyn.
Hello, Cynthia.
Welcome to Down to Heal.
Thank you for having me.
So we came together at a most stressful time, as a lot of my guests have come in that regard. And I want to thank you because I reached out on a phone call stressing because our son's behavior was being exacerbated at school. And it was during a time that insurance didn't cover ABA for Down syndrome. And it was the turning point where it was going to be in the following January. And you took my call and you listened wholeheartedly as you were on a trip to California with your family and said, I'll take you on. And thank God, because I had been through 3 other phone calls with other ABAs and the lists were long. So, if you would mind introducing yourself and your credentials, I would really appreciate that.
Well, thank you, and thank you for recalling such a great moment for both of us. And so a little bit about my background that led me to be able to have that phone call with you. I got my undergraduate degree in special education from the University of Central Florida. I was very much focused on becoming a reading specialist and working with children with reading disabilities. I then went out to California like a young, free-spirited woman wanting to save the world, not really sure what I was going to do as a grown-up, and I needed a job. And so I went on my first interview, and the headmaster of this private school in California said, "What do you know about Asperger's?" And I said, what? She laughed. I laughed. It was completely inappropriate. And she didn't ask me another question, but she hired me to teach this beautiful little room of 6 boys that changed my life. This was the year 2000. when the whole autism thing was just getting going, and it was more advanced in California, in Southern California. And I fell in love with the direct instruction of social skills, and that there are other ways than naturalistic environments to teach social skills and communication. And I decided that I loved human behavior. And my master's degree was going to be in counseling, and then to go on, and I got my board certified behavior analysis certification from the Florida Institute of Technology here in Florida. I moved back to my roots in Naples, where I began my journey, both in public and private settings, until one day I said, I have a vision. And I'm the only person I know that can lead that vision. And that vision was to be the most comprehensive and compassionate service provider of applied behavior analysis to all children. What came as a love of that ASP whatever syndrome it was, to absolutely falling in love with human behavior and how I can impact that, and I can change it for the better, and I can teach others how to be compassionate while changing behaviors in a positive way. And I now own 2 practices in the Collier County area, one in Naples, really close to you on Goodlet Road, and one in Ave Maria. And I absolutely love what I do. What started as a dream in my guest room of my house is now a corporation with 63 employees serving almost 72 families in the Collier County area.
Wow, that's impressive. And we were one of the first families, and especially I think your very first family with Down syndrome, with a child with Down syndrome. And he was just getting evaluated for ABA within school, and had just started to have the prognosis of maybe he is with apraxia. And it was like that synchronicity and coming together with you. You gave us peace of mind during a time where everything was so elevated. I mean, you came in, and thank goodness you were brand new, right? Because we were going through 7 IEPs that year, and you helped attend and really just held space for us as a family. And also because of your background, and including my, teaching background, but really me leaning on you as a parent and going, I'm seeing this. Help me as an outsider see what's going on in this meeting of how many people are here, and they're telling me, forgive me because it's getting me emotional, how awful my son is. Help me see the beauty in this. So, how do you do that for other families?
I have to say it's a core belief of mine. And when it's a core belief that you own, you don't have to pretend. You don't have to develop it. I truly believe that each one of our children with additional needs is beautiful. And I think something you and I connected on, and I've always honored both you and Doug on this, is that our children, no matter what the diagnosis, are going to succeed to our expectations. If we leave those expectations to, they have a disability, they have this diagnosis, they have that diagnosis, we're limiting these babies. We can't do that. And I think that's where the 3 of us, 4 with Jack included, that's where we met, is we're not setting any ceilings, guys, here. I don't care what the diagnosis is. We've got a child. We just have to find that child's gifts. Truly. And when you find the gifts, the challenges seem more manageable. If we just focus on those challenges, folks, we're going to be hitting our head against a wall.
And I think that's like the difficult part in parenting, is to keep that connection when behaviors including that co-regulation and that wanting to be regulated while your child is, one of displaying behaviors that are sometimes incomprehensible. So how do you recommend parents achieve that co-regulation? Because so often, even in my practice, I see that not happening.
I couldn't support that feeling more. And I think that's really where, and you and I experience this together, is having somebody a part of your team that doesn't have the emotional connection that you do as a parent. And I didn't get this till I was a parent. I was like, you can just emotionally detach. I was a beautiful behavior analyst, but I hadn't experienced motherhood yet. And I didn't understand that connection that you get emotionally. And Cynthia, you have consulted with my son, and it's been helpful again to have somebody not with the same level of emotional attachment. There's going to be times you've got to tap out. There's got to be that somebody that you can pick up that phone and say, you will not believe this. We were in the middle of the mall and he took off all of his clothes. Because as the parent, as much as we want to say we don't do it, we validate ourselves as a parent by our child's behavior.
Yes.
And if we don't have that tap out person, we let it snowball to then emotionally owning that to, I'm a bad person. I'm doing something wrong. I'm, instead of my child is neurodivergent. Their neural pathways don't allow them to regulate. They need other forms of, supports to find that regulation. They need, direct instruction, shaping in communication, in deep breathing, in, visualization, in tolerance. Each child is different on what they're missing to establish regulation. But if we don't have that person that isn't emotionally is detached, you're going to blame. You're going to devalue yourself. Marriages are going to fall apart because you're angry at your spouse while not knowing that they're feeling that same defeat that you are, and you just need somebody that's emotionally not involved.
Boy, didn't you hit it on the nail. I remember one incident, Jack was having some meltdown, and Doug looked at me and said, what do I do? And I looked at him like, I don't know. We're going to just grab and put and say 3, 2, 1 and down, right? And move forward. And we're going to practice as best as possible all that we've learned through you. And it really definitely took some grace on both of our parts. And that was challenging because, right, you think you're typically, we had been married for 5 years by the time we had Jack. And you think by that time, you have it down, right? You have that third dynamic and one that has an intense personality and can read the room so well, which I know those neurodivergent kids do, because their systems are meant to, right? They're so in tune and out of tune at the exact same time. It's like they just know when it's like plucking that string.
It's survival for
it
them.
Is.
We're still organisms and interacting with an environment, no matter what our neural pathways are doing. It's still that innate behavior, and they will work you like you can't imagine. And if they then on top of that see, my two parents, I can get them distracted because then they start fighting each other. Oh, win-win. our little neurodivergent babies are hitting the lottery because their behavior is no longer a focus because mom and dad or mom and mom are so busy arguing with each other. I'm eating cake, watching the show.
Oh my goodness. So, eating the cake. Do you remember coming over and helping Jack learn how to eat? Just eat, right? Without the goldfish and like, oh, that was. How do you help parents with like eating? Because eating is a really big one in our community. Like to get that diversity of food, which then helps or doesn't, depending on what they're eating, their emotional regulation and their gut brain relationship and so forth. How do you help with that?
Again, I'm very much a single case person. It depends on the child. And again, contacting somebody who is not emotionally attached. I think as a society, we perseverate on food, and sometimes just leaving the food battle alone for a little bit resets it all. So a lot of times I'll say, let's pause it. And after a pause, then I can better detect what the real issue is. You know, it may be a medical clearance. We need to make sure that their swallowing mechanisms are intact. I need to make sure, you know, that their sensory, is it the smell of the food? Is it the texture? There's so many things involved with food. One time I had a child and I started a pretty intense feeding program with this child. And I wasn't understanding why I wasn't successful. And then one day I did something that in all of my coursework I was told not to do, was to eat with the child. I was told, you know, I'm a professional. You don't eat with you eat on your lunch break, all those things. And I sat down and I ate a chicken nugget with him. And he watched me. And he watched me. And I didn't need any extra reinforcer. I didn't need the iPad. I didn't need anything. And he picked up the chicken nugget and he ate it. Come to find out, then mom felt comfortable enough to divulge to me that she struggles with anorexia. So the child had never
felt comfortable with food
and even observed, because it was a single parent family, hadn't had exposure to somebody eating solid foods in a positive, energetic, healthy way.
Never thought of that. I'm Latin. Let's be real. You're not hungry? Good. I'm going to feed you.
And after that, we're going to eat some more.
Right?
Yes. So every case I've found something different. So when somebody says, you know, what's going on with all these, you know, feeding problems and obesity. And I said, give me the family, give me the single case study to look at. And then we can problem solve together. When we like to give these blanket procedures and blanket quick fixes, guess what? Our babies are not quick fixes. If anyone can agree with that, it's you.
Truly, because it definitely takes repetition. And I think, I don't know if it's been your experience. Do parents tire out of the repetition?
Oh, yes. And our little babies love when you're tired. And they know right when you're tired. And they're like, perfect. We are not going to have to do that sequencing anymore because mom just yawned and dad is still at work. And grandma gives me the cookie anyway. We're set.
So what do you suggest parents do? What do they do when they're tired? How do you recommend, do they give up, or do they, I like to say I wear the S, and my S isn't super, it's stubborn. Like that is my superhero. It's stubbornness. Like if you're going to like act that way, I'm going to hold out equally as long, and we're going to see who wins. Right? And I will say this. It was really uncomfortable at times in our house, and my poor husband was like, really?
we're picking this now. How about tomorrow?
I gotta work, babe.
This is really unsettling. I like a peaceful home. And I can say that because I know Doug. And I know exactly what he was processing at that moment.
And we had a peaceful home.
Yes.
Technically. Right? Still, I can see it in so many families that it just gets to be like, and I've been asked, how do you do this? How do you have energy to do this? So what do you recommend?
Self-care. I do a lot of that with parents, and I make sure that parents are getting therapy. They're doing much of the work that you do and promote. You know, I loved learning about energy work from you, and it's been so helpful for me. If they're not taking the time to do that, to make sure they're eating well, they're drinking water, they're doing those things for themselves, there is no way that they're going to be able to face and to follow through on the interventions that I would suggest. You know, we always use that adage, we hear it on the planes, not as much because they've turned to those video screens, but when the airbag would drop down, it's always put the airbag mask on you and then assist children and elderly. And we've got to keep that as we're going into helping our neurodivergent children, is that if you are not taken care of, I can promise you, you're going to fail. And you're not only going to fail yourself, but you're going to fail your kid because you're giving half-butt interventions. And that can almost be more dangerous than not doing anything at all. I always say, if you're going to follow through on a behavior, make sure you're ready. Do a self-check first. Whether you know that you're stubborn, whether you know that you've just had a great yoga session and you're in a great space to follow through, or if you're going to tap out early. So if the behavior is not something you can take on at that moment, give in right away. Because if you wait that behavior out 30 minutes and then give in because they've worn you down, you've just strengthened a maladaptive behavior.
Ooh, that's a good one.
So self-check first. Either give in early or you better see this through, baby.
And you better have enough energy to do it. So, what do you find that parents need as far as like behavior goes, and talking about like reward versus like negotiation? Because I know I often would do like, okay, first this, then that. Yet, like, I know other parents who would be like, would you please just do this and you will have that cookie, that. What's the differentiation?
I've actually gotten really, really good at explaining this now with my staff. Because, you know, I have a lot of technicians, which are high school grads, a lot of them not parents, young, it's their first job. And I finally said it this way. I said, once a behavior starts, you're done talking. Because they are going to see that as negotiation opportunities. Once you're saying, I need you to sit down, and they're in this tantrum, or they're in the even a shutdown, you know, their head's on the table, they're shut down, and, you know, you're trying to get them out of that shutdown. Once that behavior is started, they know once you start talking, they have your full attention. They see room for negotiation. They know that you're not happy with them. So we want to make sure that we're always giving the first thens before the behavior. So we're constantly one step ahead of them. So first, we're going to go to the lunchroom. Then I'm going to give you your juice box out of your lunchbox, because I know in my mind that's the most preferred thing in their lunchbox. And that's going to start a behavior chain of getting lunch rolling. But I know, because I know this child, that transitions are difficult. But if I wait till come on, let's go to the lunchroom. They're dropping to the floor. Remember, you're going to get that juice box. We just need to get to that lunchroom. They're going, okay, I can get the juice box and my gummies And by then, I won't need to touch my protein that's really going to make my day better, but I'm going to work this lady because
I like that
she
sugar.
just wants me to get up off the ground. It's that thinking ahead, that staying one step ahead of them.
So that is some major problem solving in their heads that I think a lot of the additional needs community sometimes like devalues or doesn't tap into and go, how do we rework that brain? Any suggestions?
A lot of time, a lot of, I mean, in the science shows us the development of new neural pathways can happen with high levels of repetition, access to reinforcement, all of those things that I spent way too many years studying. It's possible. Also, too, and I hate to say this because it hurts my heart, but I keep seeing it. Our parents don't even believe that their kids can process that high to manipulate. They'll say things to me like, they're not smart enough to think about doing that. Oh, yes, they are. Because I watch them do it to you day in and day out. We truly don't believe in the cognitive functions of our children. Just because one part of their brain isn't functioning the way we think it should be doesn't mean there aren't other parts of the brain that are stronger, because they've had to adapt that to, again, back to that survival. So we underestimate that they're really thinking and they've processed what they can do once they drop to that floor and you start the negotiations. But we don't give them credit. We don't have those expectations, those ideas that they have it in there. It may not come out the way because apraxia, because of that part of the brain that lets them communicate the way we communicate, doesn't mean their brains aren't rolling like crazy. We just can't tap into it.
So, what do you say to parents who are like, well, my child is neurotypical, or I hate to use this word normal because I don't really feel like any child, and especially in this day and age, is, right? With all the environmental factors that are happening. So, when a child is displaying behaviors, in my philosophy is if you've got a broken arm, wouldn't you go have it checked? If you're seeing a child, what is your philosophy if they're on the neurotypical spectrum and displaying behaviors?
I would definitely recommend seeing somebody, and definitely always start with your pediatrician, your homeopathic general practitioner. Talk to them because we always do want to rule out medical. That's a big part. I've had some kids, it's been an ear infection, especially when they're younger. And sometimes antibiotic resistant, or we're not treating it the way that's effective. Rule out medical first. Make sure we're treating that stuff. I do think sometimes gut issues, not at all the proponent of, that's the cause of neurodivergent, but I do feel it does affect the way we feel. I dealt with it a lot with my son, and you were there to help me. We did a lot of brainstorming about, how his gut, and we had to take a lot of stuff out, and it completely changed his focus and stuff like that. But really keep searching, because sometimes our first answer we get, even from a doctor or from our neighbor, just take it all in. Don't rule out anything. Because usually somewhere in the mix, you're going to find what's right for your kid.
Agreed. Just don't take it all on as well.
Yes, that's a great point, Cynthia. Don't take it all on and try and do too much. Because, too, just back to good scientific procedures, when we get too many variables, we can't, that correlation and causation, the whole thing. We've got to be careful of that.
So because you brought up the correlation and the causation, what about like how many behaviors do you start addressing all at one time? Because I can see some parents being like, "Oh, I'm going to address this and that and this," and they've got like 5 or 10, or how many should they start with? Because let's be real, our kids can have some
Yeah.
behaviors.
I always say we start with the ones that are unsafe,
Okay.
that can hurt themselves or others. I always tackle those first. One that I really struggle with in recent years, because I really feel society's changing, is parents come to me about profanity. And I say, I'm not going to tackle it. And they say, but you just can't go around swearing. I said, well, what are we going to do when we take away the swearing? Are they going to start hitting? Are they going to start... I said, let's be careful taking away swearing right away. I said, also, if we look in society right now, it's somewhat accepted. And so I often say, how can we downgrade it? A lot of times a behavior doesn't need to be totally gone. We need to downgrade it. Some kid that might be hard hitting to get a peer or adult's attention, we can replace that with a tap. This is, a tap on the shoulder is different than a punch to the shoulder.
Truly.
So in my field, we do a lot of what's called giving replacement behaviors. And sometimes it's just downgrading a behavior. And then it's somewhat acceptable until that child with apraxia can get their communication together to say, excuse me.
Right.
Think about all that needs to happen. Well, if I can downgrade it to a tap while the speech therapist is working on getting them to say, excuse me, we've got a win-win. But to address what I always go for, anything that's harmful.
So would you say, okay, let's say that they have a lot of harmful behaviors. Do you go with like 3, or do you go with just trying to get them all extinguished or downgraded?
That really is a case by case. I need
Gotcha.
to look at what the function of the behavior is. I need to look at how often I'm seeing the child, what level of participation I have from the parents. Again, it's all these components. So, if there was a one recipe for all, I'd have a
Right.
book that would be a hot seller right now, Cynthia.
Yes, and I have someone who I would recommend that one too. So tell me, like, having parent have a relationship with their child and really being able to see the loveliness in spite of all that they're being told, right? I want to really come back to that because I think that in my own journey has been my challenge in the very beginning. It's not anymore, and thank God, right? We have a very amenable child, and it has taken a lot of patience and a lot of support on so many different professional levels. Yet we are seeing the rewards now. I think sometimes in our community, in the additional needs community, the extended amount of time of where we see, and I see this with older caregivers, is how long is it going to take? And that I don't know when. And I didn't know when either. What do you yeah.
This is the part of the journey that I've really embraced with parents. And I still, in my practice, as large as it is, just like that day you called me, I still do the intake calls. Even as a CEO, of a large corporation. Because my heart's there with you. You get that diagnosis. And for some, it's right at birth. For some, it's at age 2. Some, it's at age 9. You get that diagnosis, and no matter what they say, you go through the grieving process. I know what I did the second I peed on that stick and it came back positive. I saw this beautiful girl going to prom, looking just like me, but taller, because I always wanted to be taller, and that's why I married a 6'5" guy. I had her name picked out. I had her room picked out. Then I got the first blow when I found out it was a boy. I was like, okay. That was a little bit. But you have their whole life planned out by the day you give birth, whether or not you admit it or not. When you're on the treadmill, making sure that you keep your weight in check so that you have the perfect pregnancy and you follow your birth plan and you've done everything right. And you find out it's not what you dreamed of.
Mm-hmm.
You grieve.
Mm-hmm.
And then we try to say, but I'm not allowed to be sad. And you fight it. And I try to say to parents, be sad. You're mourning a dream. And you're going to have to rebuild a dream. And unfortunately, a lot of times when we get diagnoses, the medical professionals are so strapped with time and resources. They give the diagnosis and they give you all the, I call, side effects. Your kid's not going to read till late, if they even read at all. They may not live on their own. They like to throw that out there like there is no tomorrow. And you're like, whoa, 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 whoa. And I really enjoy being that person that says, take a deep breath. We're going to find the blessings. And it's not going to be easy. You're allowed to be upset. And then often I get, typically it's the moms that call me, the type A moms, which I'm part of the club. Well, I've already read everything about it. Let's get going. We need services tomorrow. I have heard that early intervention is the best way to do. And I, again, have to say pause. Because if you spend all your time finding a fix to get back to that dream, you're going to miss the beauty. You're going to miss finding that part of the brain that is overdeveloping and is the gift. Because you're trying to fix. No, I'm not saying that we don't want to do therapy and we're not setting goals and we're not trying to get them independent and those things that we're told that they're never going to do or they might never. Studies say, yes, we love research. But don't forget to see those little beauties. Because that's what's going to keep you emotionally connected. Because also, too, we have to remember they still have our DNA. So my son is a part of the neurodivergent community. He still has my smart-ass sense of humor. Like there's no tomorrow. But if I'm spending all of my time working on phonemic awareness because he still can't really read at 13, I'm not going to have the time to sit back and laugh, belly laugh till it hurts. Because I've pushed that aside trying to fix him.
Very well.
So I know that was kind of a large, but you gotta make time. And the same thing that connected partners together, mm-hmm. Chances are you're gonna find that in your child. Because genetics is a cool thing. And it can really piss you off because they have the same
ancestral
downfalls.
Lineage. Should we talk about that one?
Oh, I think that could be a whole episode.
So talk to me about, like, I find that the neurodiverse community, especially my son, has taught me about addiction, right? Because they have very addictive behaviors. So does ABA help with addiction?
There's actually some good research coming out about ABA. Both in addiction, in Alzheimer's community, and in all different areas where we're learning about, neuroplasticity and how ABA can, even in our elderly years. But I have some theories personally on how we're kind of all evolving with the overusage of technology and
What, that addiction?
yeah, I have a feeling addiction's gonna hit.
Sky high.
Yes, because we're not learning to wait to access reinforcement. It's right there. I had a client, teenage client, who was just getting ABA for the first time, and she said to me, I said, well, you can work for something on Amazon. I don't want to wait for Amazon. We're developing a generation that has trouble waiting to the next day to receive a package.
Get out of town. Seriously, I never even thought about that. Wow, that is incredible. It's funny because I just wrote an article for Neapolitan Family, and it will be redirected for additional needs, right? Incorporated. And it was all about like using summer chores as a way to put off and reward behavior and teach them that not everything comes immediate. Had no idea about, well, everything is so instant now. I guess relationships are also going to be the same way.
We are in trouble. I think as a society, if we don't start making conscious efforts to delay access to reinforcement, we've got a tough road ahead of us, and that frontal cortex is going to struggle with executive functioning and all those other things.
So, executive functioning, right? That breaking down and prioritizing what needs to be worked on first, then next, right? What's urgent versus what's important. I know adults that have difficulty with that one.
Yeah, it's something I'd like to tackle right away. I remember doing it with Jack, a 3-step direction. And people are like, why are you going to need that? Most things in life require 3 steps or more. And if you can't follow a 3-step by giving 3 steps and then the child follows it, like touch your nose, touch your head, clap your hands, what do you think tying shoes is going to be like? What do you think getting dressed is going to be like? Cooking a meal. We have to teach those skills at a young age and early on in therapy, because our executive functioning has to be there. I would always say with my kid, as before we had a formal diagnosis of ADHD, I would look at my husband, I'm like, he can't put one foot in front of the other. And then my husband would say, but he can on the baseball field. And I was like, yes, because the motivation's there. We have to still follow directions and multi-steps even when we're not highly motivated.
Right.
We have to be disciplined.
Right.
And not constantly reinforced.
All those likes.
Yeah, we can't wait to put up our Facebook post to see how many people like it. We're constantly craving this need for reinforcement and validation. And anyway, that's a whole nother twist on society.
Well, let's kind of go there a little
Okay.
bit because of the phone technology. And right now we have a teenager, and I find myself kind of like withholding the phone, not because of me necessarily. He's not interested. So when do you decide I should give my child a phone? Because really, now with the technology, the bullying, I'm a little apprehensive with, let's be honest, the trafficking and Collier County is high in that. Yeah. Thoughts?
Again, I'm going to do a really cool little William, my son. So, with his beautiful ADHD, I gave him a phone when he went to public school because he was walking from school to my clinic. And, the first thought is, oh, he's got to be safe. He's got to have a phone. So I gave him the phone, and then I have very strict limits. I have Bark app on it. I watch everything he does. And then he lost the phone. And I said, well, I'm not buying you another one. You're fine. I know you can walk. There's people along the way. We'll get you. And then I said to him a little later, I said, it's getting to be summertime. How about we just get you a flip phone or something so I can call you at least and have some more freedom? And he said, you know what, Mom, I'm happier without my phone. And I said, tell me about it. He goes, because we talk more. He goes, I'm not watching all that, I guess they call it brain rot, gut rot, or some rot. They have some, teenage term for it. But my own son said, I'm happier without it. And now he has it back. We found it. It was in his dad's car underneath a seat. Typical ADHD move. But it was dead, so I couldn't do the Find My iPhone. Again, ADHD can't keep up with anything. He was happier. And I think if we tune into our kids and giving them those forced breaks and then reflecting back on, how did that make you feel? What things did you enjoy when you didn't have access to your phone? I think more of our kids would say, I really liked fishing. I really liked going on that bike ride. But all of their friends are, because also in teenage years, what do we look for? Peer approval. So I think one of the best things parents can do is find those times and then reflect with their kid about those feelings, about what other activities they enjoyed. And then it's not just mom being the meanie that she is, not giving me time on technology. It's I made this choice for myself.
Right. I have to say, I want to go back to like when I was growing up where the phone was on the wall and you had to go and use an answering machine, and whoever really wanted to contact you, you knew they were your friends because they were trying to get a hold of you versus, not that technology hasn't provided a way to connect, right? And reach out and learn. There's some wonderful things yet.
And that's fine if they were using it as a phone. I think if we polled 9 out of 10 teenagers, they're not using it to communicate. They're using it to game. They're using it to watch these YouTube shorts. They're using it, for other things than communication.
True.
Their social media, that's not communication, guys. And that's something that I think parents need to have those discussions with their kids. Social media is not communication. Communication is a back and forth thing, not posting and waiting for a like or a comment. But our kids are thinking that it is, and those are relationships, and those are good things. And we as parents have to stop that, no matter what level of communication our kids have. We need to watch it.
So let's go there because you just did I'm going to kind of circle back to the neurodivergent. You knew that Jack had apraxia and you met him at age 6. He was in his first year of first grade. And I say that because we held him back the following year because he went into gen ed. Thank you very much for that assistance. During that time, he maybe said like a word or two, maybe, right? Barely. So communication, it's not always words. How do you I have my own, like, how I communicated with my son. Even though I was verbal, I used my energy. How do you explain that to parents, or how do you recommend that they communicate with their child? And especially with parents who, forgive me, may have certain behaviors themselves.
Parental to child communication is always different than what I call the untrained listener. You're a trained responder listener. You know your kid's every move, their energy, the way he was sitting. We do as parents. And then we have to realize we've got to get this kid ready to go into a world that doesn't communicate with them that way. And I can only be their interpreter for so long. So I have to be diligent in finding that other modality of communication. So, just like I did with Jack, I'm going to throw out all forms of communication that we know, from pointing to pictures to a AAC device to sign language, pointing. We're going to give them all, it's called a multimodality approach to communication for the untrained listener. I encourage parents to keep on that parental connection, but just remember you're not always going to be there to interpret and translate. So as we're reading and we're understanding, we're also exposing them to a way everybody else is going to understand them. And especially as we were challenged with, Jack's apraxia, he really needed. Mm-hmm. And now he's very understandable. Mm-hmm. But also, too, if we didn't give other ways for him to communicate, he wouldn't have had the access to the academic levels that he did. Because how do we test that? And we struggled a lot with that when we would get test scores and all those things because of the apraxia, because so much in our world is verbal communication.
Right.
So they're looked upon as not as intelligent, as not as skilled, as not as capable. So if we give them other ways to say, oh, yes, I am, mm-hmm. besides just mom or dad, we are giving them tools to unlock endless possibilities, more exposure to general ed classrooms, exposure to outside activities that those gifts that they really like, that they're gifted in, sports, arts, music. But our world is so heavily reliant on the equation of communication and intelligence.
Truly.
So if we want to level the playing field, we've got to say, okay, well, then we've got to give them some way to communicate so the world knows what I know as their mom, that they're capable of doing.
So do you think that, like we did baby sign language, do you recommend that parents stay with sign language, or do you recommend like transitioning to the AAC device, or does that also, play upon like the actual individual?
I'm still a big fan of sign language. There's really good research to support it. There's up and coming research about AAC devices and the development of language. Again, I'm just worried about the blue screen component of an AAC device. I like to make that a last resort. Mm-hmm. And I'm very strict on locks and everything else that we put on that when we get to there. I would rather them use a picture exchange, as archaic as it is. Those binders with all the different mm-hmm. pictures. I'm not a huge fan of when they get to that level of communication and they're needing a binder, let's go to an AAC device. Again, it's a single case design. My son was great at sign language. He also, verbal communication is a strength. Just don't give him a pencil or a piece of paper or a keyboard. Can't even type. We're all voice to text accommodations. So again, it's single case, and that is one of the blessings. We talked a lot about the curses of technology and the way it's inhibited development and social development. But at the same time, we also have to see the blessings of technology. My son would not be in all advanced classes if he didn't have voice to text capabilities. You know, people say, well, give him a computer. Homeboy cannot even type. You know, we've done OT for years, and we finally just said we're going voice to text. But we have to embrace it and caution it at the same time. And what a crazy place to be. You know, we've got all these capabilities, but whoa, that blue screen and the addiction and the impulsivity.
Right. And the disrupted sleep and disrupted hormone dysregulation. Yeah, all that. I watched it during COVID. We homeschooled, and had no idea that a 6-hour school day on the computer would cause such emotional dysregulation that it wasn't an option. It was just like, he needs to go back to a regular classroom, and this isn't working. And I'm glad we tried it. Yet, not a fan.
And we saw what happened to our kids during that time.
Right.
Neurodivergent, neurotypical, whatever that is. We saw that it just wasn't a good thing. We're social creatures, and you know that technology is not all it's cracked up to be. But again, and I do feel we'll find a happy medium to say, you know, I think we're gonna look for some more connectivity.
So, since we kind of talked about disrupted sleep, and well, the neurodivergent community often experiences disrupted sleep. Would any recommendations of how to get a child to go to bed, stay in bed?
Remember that S you wore?
The stubbornness.
Yeah. I'd say take a healthy dose of that. Again, pick that battle when you and your partner or grandparent or you have backup. You can take time off from work. You can, and again, I know that's not always capable. Parents are struggling to make ends meet. I feel ya. I do. Again, make a plan. Don't just say, "Oh, I'm over this. I'm gonna fight this tonight." No. You're not fighting it tonight. You need at least a week preparation to plan out. A lot of times, we do potty training. You know, a lot of people do a potty training boot camp, and they say this weekend we're going to stay at home. He's going to go without underwear, and we're just going to do it. I often recommend when you're going to go into a significant sleep program, have that time that you're off, or a time when you can then have a time to recharge, because you're going to have to wear that capital S with a cape, a crown, your light up shoes, and everything else to get through it. Also, to look at the befores, your preparation for sleep. We can't just lay a kid down to bed and expect them to stay. They've battled the world in their own superhero cast. Their days are tough. They might need a longer, what we call bedtime ritual than others. You know, please don't try and put your kid down right after having technology. In fact, my pediatrician, we were just at the pediatrician doing a checkup, and he was preaching the same thing. You know, my son was saying sometimes he still has disrupted sleep and getting to sleep. And the doctor, the first thing he brought up was, are you accessing technology an hour before sleep? And of course, William said, no. Do you know my mom? But, you know, that is something to look at. What is our before? How long are they eating? Are they hungry again? Are they still in the high rate of digestion? And that's uncomfortable. Is it the food that they're eating making their belly uncomfortable? We need to, all those things that we talked about with other behaviors, we need to look at those before we say, okay, I'm going to put on that super S and I'm bringing them back to bed every time. But in the end, it is you're going back to your bed. And I went through it through COVID. I messed up. I was super mom. That kid never slept in my bed until COVID. And then it was really hard to get a 9-year-old out of my bed.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Yeah. We gave in hardcore. And we struggled real hardcore too. But we did it. But we had to finally say enough.
So we went through the behaviors, right, and trying to get him to sleep until we had a sleep study. And then I was learning biofeedback when you and I met, and we helped get him to actually sleep so that we could too, right? And then he was diagnosed with insomnia. So back to your whole medical, get that checked out.
Absolutely. I say that with potty training. I say that with food issues. I say that with sleep. You've got to rule out, or you really will go insane, because then my behavioral stuff is worthless if the medical isn't addressed.
So talk to me about that with potty training. What should parents look for that might be like a telltale sign that it's a medical thing, not a behavioral thing?
Some of the ones I've seen, as simple as a UTI, and they're having the frequent urinations and they don't make it to the bathroom in time, and that's an easy fix. To, I've had full-on bladder issues, issues where circumcisions weren't done and the foreskin had grown in a way that was trapping urine. Again, I don't know the whole medical part of it, but the doctor said, we do need to do a later in childhood circumcision, which is not comfortable for the kid. I've had urethras going the wrong, misformed urethras. I've had all kinds of things that we say, no, not yet. We've got to, take care of these medical things. A couple of them that I'm really struggling with now is kids don't take in enough liquids to get potty training effectively going. If I don't have an urge to go to the bathroom, why are you going to sit me on that toilet? So I was just explaining to a new behavior analyst in my practice. I said, we're not even looking at potty training now. I want to record how many ounces of liquids this kid is getting in his body a day, because he'll only drink this protein milk. Which, again, I have my own things about synthetic proteins. But we need to shape drinking water first.
Isn't that the truth? And especially with the neurodivergent community, we need hydration to influence those neurotransmitters, because if there's not enough hydration, the neurotransmitters are not going to be doing their jobs. And if you want your child thinking, zip
Anything
zero
on a cellular level,
right?
or a neuron level. Like, you just...
We forget that brain is the electrical, right, part of our body. And water is the greatest conductor of electricity. So let's remember hydration.
This kid is making some great gains now that we've literally shaped the behavior of drinking water. And it wasn't easy. He didn't really like it. We'd do it very small amounts until he kind of tricked him that he was drinking water, and then it's all good because it put it in the same container and all those little tricks that we have up our sleeves. But I mean, all the time people come to me, my kid's 8 and they're not potty trained. Well, we've got to look. That's the end result. That's Z. We need to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, to get to Z, and to really address Z.
Amazing. All that you have to problem solve in our community and beyond, because I can see that teenagers, and especially in this day and age, having some behaviors as well, as far as food, eating, self-image, how they talk to themselves, right? And that's a behavioral issue as well.
And again, back to your thoughts about communication. You know, their behavior is their way of communicating something's not right. Or I need something. And that need may be counseling. That need may be exercise. So it's displaying as something that's god awful. Oh my gosh, my kid is cutting. My kid is self-harming. Okay, let's do those same processes I just did about potty training. Just because they're in advanced classes and they're an athlete, they're telling you something, Mom. Let's go back.
Right.
The cutting or the self-harm or sneaking out at night, that's our Z. What's our ABC? And then Z is tackleable. You know, then we can tackle Z. We can't just start at Z.
Very interesting. Would not have thought of that at all. Well, is there anything that you wish to share with the additional needs community that we haven't discussed today?
I think I shared upon it, but it really is that remember they have a strength. And I actually saw this meme or something, you know, one of those little things. It probably was in a baseball mom's thing that said, if your child was good at pitching, but was a slow runner, get them pitching lessons, not running lessons.
Right.
So make sure we're developing those strengths and not just spending all our time trying to bring up those areas of weakness.
Well, thank you, because that is really, and not to put it back on us, but what we have really tried to do with the music, the Sharp Livin', not only to help Jack speak, but he loves music, right? And we just did Camp Shriver through Special Olympics, and they have a talent show at the end. He sang a song. Our son with apraxia and Down syndrome was up on stage acting like Andy Grammer singing Monster. And I was just like, I cannot believe. Had someone told me back then he'll be doing this, I would have been like, wow, that's really cool. Now how am I going to get there? Right?
Well, and too, that it actually brings up a conversation we had with Jack. And you laughed at me when I used this word. I said, sometimes we can over-therapize.
Yes,
Do you
I
remember that
remember that.
conversation?
I remember that phrase, but I don't remember what it was about.
You were all stressed out about how you were going to get in all these therapies.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to you, let's stop ABA. I said, you're over-therapizing. You're stressing yourself out. You're stressing him out.
Mm-hmm.
Again, what we get with those diagnoses, you get this diagnosis, and then you get a referral for ABA, you get a referral for speech, you get a referral for PT, you get a... Whoa. Breathe, mama, breathe.
Don't you love that book?
Yes, you gave it to me. But I remember saying to you, we can over-therapize.
And I was grateful for that. And it was like a shock. And I was like, but I know neuroplasticity. I work in that realm. I know we can actually make more neurons wired together if they fired together. So, why aren't we going to do that? And man, he hasn't, I don't think he's seen you since he was 8 years old, and now he's 15. And we really backed off. We haven't seen speech since 2017. We backed off, took middle school, and just went, all right, except for vision therapy we did for a bit of time, and thank goodness for that, because now our child can actually cross the street and see that a car is coming if he so chooses, without like closing his eyes. Right? So is it perfect? No. Is it beautiful to witness? Absolutely. And our life is a lot saner because of it. So thank you.
Yeah,
you
so
were a
those are
godsend.
Well, thank you. And your son and your family are a blessing, and we've grown together. So just, take all those things in, and you'll come up with the answer that's right for your family.
Right? Every family has its own dynamic, its own relationships. It's, I wish everyone had, a grounded husband who was patient and and I'm sure you've seen a lot of dynamics. So what, may I ask, since we have that on before we exit, what do you think keeps families together, happily married?
That big S.
That big S, the stubbornness to
We're not
see
going
it
to
through.
give up. And I can say that in my own marriage. It's just not a choice. Now, that's the stay together. The other part of what you brought up was the happy. There's many marriages, relationships that are together but not happy. So you say to me, okay, then what do we do to take that to the next level when we have the additional pull against our happiness of a challenging child? And that takes whatever your belief system falls into, whether it's therapy, whether it's a good religious organization, it has to be something outside. And it has to be conscious. I always say, you don't wait till you get fat to go to the gym. Don't wait till your marriage or your relationships are falling apart to work on them. Do those check-ins with your partner. Do those check-ins with your in-laws. Sometimes that can cause more stress in our marriage than we ever thought of. But we got to check in on that. And we can't just tuck it under the rug. I call it the dog poop syndrome. If you walked into a room and there was a pile of dog poop, you're not just going to step over it and say, I'll get back to it later. You're going to pick it up. You're going to take care of it. You're going to address it. We've got to do that in our relationships. Don't step over it. If your spouse hurts you, if you feel, that your mother didn't respect your house rules while she was visiting, address that. And do it in a kind, loving, positive manner, but we can't step over dog poop. It doesn't go away. There's not the dog poop fairy. There's not the relationship fairy. Relationships are work. So work at it. And don't wait till you're fat.
Understood. Well, thank you, Carolyn. I appreciate you coming on Down to Heal, and hopefully we'll be doing this again.
I would be happy to, and thank you for this opportunity.
For each other. Thank you for joining us on Down to Heal, a space where we don't escape the mess. We meet it with heart, with courage, with curiosity. This podcast is part of a bigger movement, of remembering that healing is relational, that community is sacred medicine, and that we rise by tending to the roots. And that real change begins by tending to what's been ignored for too long. Through Synchronicity and Additional Needs Incorporated, I walk alongside parents, practitioners, and families navigating the spaces where the system falls short and where the soul steps in. If something in this episode spoke to you, let it ripple, share it, sit with it, or simply take a breath. And remember, you're not alone. Because this is not just personal. It's collective. It's cultural. It's generational. It's how we build a world that holds all of us. Until next time, stay rooted in truth, stay soft in your heart, and stay down to heal.